The rain tapped softly on the window of the small New York apartment, but Jared hardly noticed it. He sat in front of his laptop, the glow of the screen lighting up his tired face. Empty coffee cups were scattered on his desk, and a half-eaten slice of pizza sat on a plate nearby. He told himself he would throw it away soon, but he was too busy scrolling. His fingers moved quickly on the trackpad as he went through one post after another on social media. The same question kept appearing on his screen again and again. Did Whitney out-sing Michael Jackson? At first, he thought it was just another random music post, the kind that appears for a day and then disappears. But this one was different. The comments were in the thousands. People shared long messages, old photos, and short video clips of Whitney Houston and Michael Jackson performing on stage. Some people wrote, "Whitney would out-sing Michael any day." Others replied, "Michael is untouchable. No one can beat him." The more Jared scrolled, the more intense the discussion became, even though no one used bad words. It was emotional, full of passion, and everyone seemed so sure they were right. Jared leaned back in his chair and smiled a little. He had grown up listening to both of them. His mother used to play Whitney's songs while cleaning the house, singing along to "Greatest Love of All," as if she were performing in a concert. His uncle was a huge Michael Jackson fan and had a collection of old concert DVDs. As a kid, Jared had watched Michael glide across the stage, dancing and singing, and wondered how a human being could move like that. For him, both artists were special. They were not just singers. They were a part of his childhood memories. He watched a short clip that someone posted of Whitney singing the national anthem at the Super Bowl. Even through his small laptop speakers, her voice sounded powerful and clear. Her notes were strong but still warm, and there was something honest in the way she sang. He felt goosebumps on his arms as the crowd in the video cheered, and the camera showed people with tears in their eyes. Right after that, another clip started playing in his feed. Michael Jackson performing "Billie Jean" at Motown 25. The stage was dark, except for one bright light that followed him. He moved smoothly, every step perfect. And when he did the moonwalk, Jared still felt that same amazement he felt as a child. He paused the video and rubbed his eyes. He knew this debate was not simple. It was not just about high notes or dance moves. It was about what people loved in music. Some loved pure voice. Some loved performance. Some loved how a song made them feel inside. As a music blogger, Jared had written many articles before album reviews, interviews with small indie artists, and list-style posts like "Top 10 Love Songs of the 90 Seconds." But this felt bigger than just another article. This question about Whitney and Michael was touching something deep in people's hearts. A notification popped up from his work email. His editor, Ava, had sent him a message about upcoming deadlines. He clicked on it, but his mind was still on the debate he had just seen. Suddenly, an idea formed in his head. What if he turned this online discussion into a serious, thoughtful story? Not a quick post chasing views, but a deep article that tried to understand why people cared so much about this question. He opened a new email and started typing to Ava. He wrote, "I have a new idea for a feature. Did Whitney really out-sing Michael Jackson? Not as a fan war piece, but as a real exploration of their voices, performances, and why people feel so strongly about them." After reading it twice, he hit send. For a few minutes, he waited, refreshing his inbox again and again, feeling a strange nervousness in his chest. The rain outside grew heavier, and car lights reflected on the wet street below. "Soon," Ava replied. "This could work," she wrote. "People are already talking about it. But you have to be fair. No lazy hot takes. Research it properly. Fans of both sides are going to read this, and they will notice every detail." Jared smiled. That was exactly what he wanted, to write something that respected both artists and also respected the readers. He pushed his chair back and walked over to the small kitchen area. As he poured another cup of coffee, he thought about how he would structure the article. He could look at vocal range, live performances, studio recordings, awards, influence on other artists, and emotional impact. He could talk to vocal coaches, music historians, and fans. He could compare specific moments, like Whitney's "I Will Always Love You" and Michael's "Man in the Mirror." The more he thought about it, the more excited he became. This was not just a simple yes or no topic. It was a journey into music, history, and memory. With his coffee in hand, he returned to his desk and opened a document to start taking notes. He wrote down the basic question at the top. Did Whitney really out-sing Michael Jackson? Under it, he added smaller questions. What does out-sing really mean? Is pure vocal power more important than unique tone? Is it fair to compare two artists who did such different things? Each question opened a new door in his mind. He knew that some readers would want a clear answer, a simple yes or no. But he also felt that the real truth might be much more complex. He went back to social media and started taking screenshots of some comments. One person wrote, "Whitney's voice is the closest thing to perfect I've ever heard." Another wrote, "Michael could make a simple word sound like magic." Some people shared personal stories. One person said Whitney's songs helped them during a hard breakup. Another said Michael's music made their childhood feel brighter. Jared realized he was not just collecting opinions. He was collecting memories, emotions, and pieces of people's lives. The apartment felt quieter now, even though the city outside was still busy. Jared noticed the ticking of the small clock on his wall and the low hum of the fridge. He looked around at the clutter books about music theory, old band posters, and a stack of notebooks filled with half-finished ideas. For a moment, he felt grateful. Not everyone got to turn something they loved into their daily work. He loved music, and he loved stories. This project would let him combine both. He clicked on a video of a young singer covering a Whitney song, and then another of someone dancing to a Michael track. These new generations were still learning from them. Even after so many years, their songs were alive, moving through new voices and new bodies. That thought touched him. The question, "Who is better?" seemed almost too small in comparison to the truth that both of them were still inspiring people today. As the night went on, Jared began to outline the first part of his article. He would start with the online debate, then introduce himself as someone who grew up with both artists. He would share the image of him sitting in his apartment, watching old clips, and reading passionate comments. He wanted readers to feel what he was feeling, the pull of nostalgia, the weight of history, and the excitement of exploring a big, complex topic. He wanted them to feel that he was not there to judge their favorite, but to understand it. He knew that, in the end, some people would still only read the headline and jump to conclusions. Some might accuse him of being biased, no matter how careful he tried to be. But he also knew there would be readers who would follow him through every line, thinking along with him, remembering the first time they heard Whitney hit a high note or Michael slide across the stage. For them, this article could be a chance to revisit those moments with fresh eyes. He stretched his arms above his head and yawned. The clock showed it was already past midnight. The argument online was still going on. New comments kept appearing. But now, for Jared, the question had changed. It was no longer just, did Whitney out-sing Michael? It was also, what does this question say about us as listeners? And why do we feel the need to compare greatness? With these thoughts in mind, he saved his notes, closed his laptop, and turned off the light. The rain outside had slowed to a gentle drizzle. As he lay down, his mind was still full of music. Whitney's soaring notes and Michael's smooth melodies blending together in his memory, guiding him toward the story he was about to tell. The next morning, Jared woke up earlier than usual. Light came in through the thin curtains, and the city outside was already busy. For a moment, He lay still and listened to the sounds of cars, distant voices, and a dog barking somewhere on the street. Then he remembered his idea from the night before and felt a small spark of excitement in his chest. He reached for his phone and checked his messages. There were a few from friends, some notifications from social media, and a short email from his editor. Ava had written, "Start with what you feel. Then find what others see. Don't rush it. This can be special." Her words gave him a quiet push. He sat up, stretched, and decided that today he would begin the real work. After a quick shower and a simple breakfast, he sat down at his desk again. He opened his laptop and typed, "Whitney Houston live performance," into the search bar. There were so many results. Concerts, award shows, interviews, rehearsal clips. It felt like opening a treasure chest. He clicked on the video of her famous Super Bowl performance first. The one he had seen 1,000 times but never really studied carefully. As the video started, the sound of the crowd filled his small room. Whitney stood there, in a white tracksuit, calm and focused. When she began to sing, Jared felt that same familiar shiver. Her voice was strong but never harsh. Each note seemed to rise and float with ease. He pressed pause and rewind several times, listening closely. He opened a notebook and started writing. He wrote things like, "So clear on the high notes. No sign of strain. Feels like she believes every word." He was not a trained singer, but he had listened to enough music and talked to enough musicians to know when something special was happening. He watched her face as she sang. There was no fear, no doubt. She looked free. After that, he clicked on another video. Whitney performing "I Will Always Love You," live on stage. The crowd was quiet at first, and the camera moved slowly from her face to the audience and back. She sang the first part soft and gentle, almost like a private conversation. Then came the big moment when the music drops and her voice soars up. Jared felt his heart lift with it, even though he knew exactly what was coming. He wrote in his notebook, "She holds the note so long. Feels like she's telling a personal story." Crowd is completely silent, then explodes at the end. He stopped and took a deep breath. He realized that it was not only her power that impressed him. It was the feeling. Even on a screen, years after the performance happened, it felt alive. Next, he turned his attention to Michael. He searched Michael Jackson Motown 25 Billie Jean and clicked on the famous clip. The stage was dark at the beginning, and then a spotlight followed him as he walked with calm confidence. The crowd was loud even before he started. Jared noticed how Michael moved as if the music was inside his body, pulling him forward. When Michael began to sing, his voice was lighter than Whitney's, but full of character. It had a sharp, clear tone that cut through the sound of the band and the cheering. Jared wrote down, "Very distinct tone, soft but strong at the same time. You can recognize him after just 2 words." He watched how Michael used his breath, how he hit the high parts without losing control, even while dancing. Then came the moment that the world never forgot. The moonwalk. Jared had seen it so many times that he could almost do it in his head. Still, it made him smile again. The crowd in the video went wild. Michael did not just sing the song. He turned it into a complete performance that filled the entire stage. Jared clicked on "Man in the Mirror Live" next. This time, he paid attention to how Michael sang the lines, how his voice grew stronger as the song went on, how he leaned into certain words. At the end of the performance, as the choir and band joined in, the whole stage felt full of energy and emotion. Jared wrote, "Starts calm, ends like a plea." He puts his whole body into the song. Feels like he is asking the audience to believe in something better. Hours passed, but Jared hardly noticed. He kept jumping between videos of Whitney and Michael, making notes about little details. He wrote about vibrato, tone, breathing, timing. He wrote about the way they used their hands, their facial expressions, the way they connected with the audience. Sometimes, after a clip ended, he sat in silence for a few seconds, letting the feeling of it stay with him. After a while, his eyes began to feel tired, and his neck hurt from leaning toward the screen. He decided to take a break. Without thinking too much, he picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found his mother's name. He pressed call. "Hey, Ma," he said, when she answered. "Jared, hi baby," she replied warmly. He could hear music playing softly in the background on her end, probably one of her old playlists. "I'm working on a new article," he said. "I'm writing about Whitney Houston and Michael Jackson. About that whole who is better question." There was a small laugh on the other end of the line. "Oh, people are still talking about that?" she asked. "They never stopped," he said. "I've been watching their performances all morning. I wanted to ask you something. When you think of Whitney and Michael, what comes to your mind first?" His mother was quiet for a moment. He could almost see her thinking. Then, she spoke slowly, as if choosing each word with care. "With Whitney," she said, "I think of her voice first. Just the voice. It was, I don't know how to say it in fancy terms, but it was clean, like clear water. She could sing a simple line and make it feel like the most important sound in the world." Jared smiled and wrote in his notebook. "And Michael?" he asked. "With Michael," she said, "I think of the whole picture. The dancing, the clothes, the stage, the lights, but also the sound of his voice. It wasn't just about high notes or big power. It was the way he could sing a word and make it feel like it had a color. Does that make sense?" It does," Jared said softly. He wrote, "Michael, voice with color, full picture performer." His mother continued, "Whitney was the voice you trusted to sing any song. You just knew she would handle it. Michael was the one who made the whole room feel different when he performed. Both of them. They changed the way people think about music." They talked for a while about the first time she heard Whitney on the radio, and how she remembered watching a Michael Jackson special on television with her siblings. She told him how people would gather in living rooms, at friends' places, just to see a new video or performance. "It felt like an event," she said, "not just a song." When the call ended, Jared felt a gentle warmth inside. His mother's words had given him more than just notes for his article. They had given him context, feeling, and small pieces of history from someone who lived through that time. He put his phone down and looked at his notebook. It was full of phrases, ideas, and observations. But one thing stood out to him. Everyone spoke differently about Whitney and Michael, but no one spoke lightly. There was always emotion in their voices, in their comments, in their memories. Jared opened a new document on his laptop and began to type out some early paragraphs. He described how he spent the morning moving back and forth between two worlds. Whitney's world of perfect, flowing vocals, and Michael's world of sound and movement combined. He wrote about how it felt to hear Whitney's voice rise without strain, and how it felt to watch Michael turn a stage into something almost magical, using only his body and his voice. As he wrote, he kept reminding himself, the goal was not to crown a winner. The goal was to understand. He wanted to show readers that out-singing could mean many different things. For some, it meant hitting higher notes. For others, it meant touching more hearts. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that the question itself was opening doors to bigger ideas. What do we look for in a singer? What matters most? In art, skill, feeling, or the mix of both? He leaned back in his chair, rubbed his eyes, and smiled. There was still so much work to do, more videos to watch, more people to talk to, more thinking to do. But he already felt closer to the heart of the story. These were not just two famous names being compared on a screen. They were two powerful voices that had reached across time, through speakers and screens, into people's lives. Outside, the sky had turned a soft golden color. The afternoon was slowly becoming evening. Jared closed his eyes for a moment and let the echoes of the songs he had heard that day fill his mind. Whitney's clear notes. Michael's unique tone. Different, but each unforgettable in its own way. He opened his eyes again, placed his fingers on the keyboard, and kept writing. Jared knew that his own feelings and his mother's memories were a good start, but not enough. If he wanted this article to be fair, he needed more than just his personal view. He needed people who understood voices in a deep, technical way, and people who understood music history. And, most of all, he needed to listen to fans who cared so much that they spent hours online talking about this question. He opened a new tab and searched for vocal coaches in his city who worked with different styles of music. After scrolling for a while, he found a coach named Elena who had a simple website. On it, she described her experience training singers in pop, R&B, and musical theater. There were short clips of her students singing and a blog where she wrote about breathing, tone, and performance. Her writing was clear and kind, not full of hard words. Jared liked that. He sent her a message explaining his article and asked if she would be willing to talk. To his surprise, she replied quickly. "I would love to," her message said. "Whitney and Michael are two of my favorite topics. Come by the studio tomorrow afternoon." She included the address and a time. Jared smiled. Things were beginning to move. The next day, he arrived at the studio, which was on the third floor of an old building. The hallway smelled faintly of dust and music books. Inside, the studio was small but cozy, with a keyboard, a full-length mirror, a bookcase filled with music scores, and a few chairs. On one wall, there were photos of famous singers and small notes from students thanking Elena for helping them. Elena herself was in her 40s, with bright eyes and a kind smile. She greeted Jared with a handshake and offered him some water before they sat down. "So," she said, crossing her legs and leaning back slightly, "you're writing about two of the biggest names in music. No small task." Jared laughed softly. "I know. I'm not trying to start another big argument. I just want to understand what makes each of them special. Especially with their voices." Elena nodded. "Good. Because if you come in here asking, 'Who is better?' I would send you right back out." They both laughed, and the tension in the room faded. Jared turned on his small voice recorder and placed it on the table between them. "Let's start with Whitney," he said. "From a vocal coach's view, what stands out to you most?" "Rhyme." Elena's eyes lit up. "Whitney Houston," she said slowly, as if tasting the name, "was what I like to call a once-in-a-generation voice. Her control was amazing. She could move from soft to strong in one breath without sounding forced. Her pitch was very steady, which means she sang the notes exactly where they should be. But what really stands out is how easy she made everything look." She leaned forward and moved her hand in a smooth line through the air. When she sang a long note, it didn't sound like she was pushing. It sounded like she simply opened her mouth, and the sound came out naturally. Like it was the most normal thing in the world. That kind of ease takes years of work, whether people know it or not. Jared wrote quickly in his notebook. Ease, control, pitch, looks natural. Years of work. "What about emotion?" he asked. "People always say they feel something when they hear her." Elena nodded. "Yes. Technical skill is one thing. Many singers can be very correct and still not touch your heart. Whitney had both. She shaped the words, not just the notes. When she sang about love or pain, you could hear it in her tone. She didn't just sing the song. She told the story of the song." Jared thought about that for a moment. Then he moved to the second name. "And Michael?" "Michael Jackson," Elena said, "is interesting because some people look at him and think of the dancing first. But if you really listen, You hear a very unique voice. He had a special tone that was sharp and clear, but also warm. You always knew it was him. That is a gift. Also, he could sing with a lot of rhythm in his voice. Even when he wasn't dancing, his singing had movement in it. She tapped the table softly with her fingers, keeping a gentle beat. He also had good control, especially for someone who moved so much on stage. Dancing and singing at the same time is not easy. Your breath changes, your body is working, but he kept his pitch quite steady. Of course, no one is perfect live, but he did a strong job. Jared asked one more question. If someone says, Whitney could out-sing Michael, what do you think they mean? Elena thought carefully. They probably mean pure vocal skill and power, she said. If you put them both in a studio and asked them to sing big, tough lines back to back, Whitney would likely sound more traditionally powerful and more classically correct. But that doesn't mean Michael was weak. He just had a different gift. His strength was in his tone, emotion, and the way he mixed singing with performance. So the question is not only who can sing higher or louder, it's what kind of voice touches you more. And that is personal. After the interview, Jared thanked her and walked out into the hallway feeling like his mind had grown a little wider. The cool air outside felt fresh on his face. He now had strong, clear words from someone who spent her life listening closely to voices. But he still wanted a larger view. Not just how they sang, but how they fit into the bigger story of music. The next person he contacted was a music historian named Daniel. They decided to meet at a quiet cafe near the library, where Daniel often did his research. The cafe had soft music playing, and small round tables with tiny vases of flowers on them. When Jared arrived, Daniel was already there, wearing glasses and holding a notebook of his own. As they sipped their drinks, Jared explained his project. Daniel listened, then smiled. People have been asking this kind of question for a long time, he said. Not just about Whitney and Michael. People used to ask who was greater between different artists from older times, too. It's a human thing, I think. We like to compare. What do you think makes this question about them so strong? Jared asked. Well, Daniel said, Whitney and Michael were not just popular. They became symbols. Whitney showed what a voice could do in pop and R&B music. She proved that a singer could be both powerful and polished on a world stage. Michael changed what a pop star looked like and sounded like. He brought together singing, dancing, visual style, and big ideas in his songs. So when people talk about them, they are not only talking about music, they are talking about memories, identity, and even pride. Jared felt that word sit heavily in his mind. Pride. Daniel continued. For many people, especially those who grew up during their time, these artists feel like part of who they are. Their songs were playing during important moments in people's lives. So when someone says, Whitney is better, or Michael is better, they are also saying, the way I feel is right, or the memories I carry are important. That is why the debate gets so emotional, even if no one uses rude words. It is not a cold question. It is a warm one, full of feeling. They talked about awards, record sales, and chart history. Daniel explained that Michael's influence reached deeply into visual storytelling, music videos, and live shows, while Whitney's influence reached deeply into how future singers dreamed of singing. Many young singers, he said, still use Whitney as a model for how to shape a big ballad. And many performers still use Michael as a model for how to command a stage. After leaving the cafe, Jared felt like he was carrying a box full of bright pieces. He had the technical side from Elena, the wide historical view from Daniel, and his own emotional reactions. Now, he needed to hear from the people who filled the comment sections and fan pages, people whose love kept the debate alive. That night, he sat at his desk again with his laptop open and joined an online fan group dedicated to Whitney. The group's page was full of photos, old magazine covers, and links to performances. He introduced himself politely, explaining that he was writing an article and wanted to hear about personal experiences. He made it very clear that he respected both artists and didn't want to start arguments, only listen. Messages began to arrive slowly at first, then more and more. One woman wrote, "I heard Whitney for the first time when I was 11. My mother was in the kitchen, and the radio was on. She stopped what she was doing and turned the volume up. I remember the look on her face. It was like she was both happy and sad at the same time. I grew up thinking that voice was what hope sounded like." Another person said, "For me, it's about how Whitney makes me feel strong. When I sing along with her songs, I feel like I can face hard days. She makes hard words sound beautiful. That's not just skill, that's heart." Jared read each message slowly, sometimes rereading them and taking notes. He noticed that people often used words like pure, angelic, strong, and comforting when they described Whitney's voice. Then, he visited a Michael Jackson fan community. The mood there was energetic, with people sharing dance videos, pictures of tour posters, and long discussions about albums. When he introduced himself and his project, many people answered quickly. One fan wrote, "Michael's music helped me when I felt alone at school. I used to watch his concerts on my old DVD player and copy the moves in my room. The way he performed made me feel like I was part of something bigger." Another said, "The thing about Michael is that he could turn a simple word into an emotional moment. The way he said love or change in his songs had weight. His voice wasn't just sound. It was full of meaning." Jared saw that people used words like energy, magic, change, and inspiring when they described Michael. As he read through all these stories, he began to see the fault lines, the places where people strongly separated into sides without meaning harm. Some said, "No one can match Whitney's voice," as if that settled everything. Others said, "No one can touch Michael's impact," as if that was the only thing that mattered. For them, one kind of greatness seemed to cancel out the other. Jared didn't judge them. He understood. When a singer becomes part of your life story, it is hard to accept that someone else might be great in a different way. It feels almost like giving away a piece of your own heart. He leaned back in his chair and thought about all he had heard. The vocal coach spoke of technique and control. The historian spoke of history and symbols. The fans spoke of comfort, strength, energy, and connection. Together, their voices made a kind of quiet choir in his mind. Slowly, he began to type, shaping the story of this part of his journey. The experts, the fans, and the invisible lines between them. He wrote about how people could listen to the same voice and feel very different things. He wrote about how a simple question, "Did Whitney really outsing Michael Jackson?" could open into a much larger conversation about what people value in art. As he worked, he realized something important. He was not just collecting opinions to balance them like numbers on a scale. He was learning how deeply music lives inside people. And that lesson, he knew, was more valuable than any final answer he might give. The days after Jared's talks with the coach, the historian, and the fans passed quickly. His notebook was full of notes, quotes, and ideas. His laptop had dozens of open tabs with videos and articles. Some nights he stayed up late, quietly listening to old performances with headphones on, letting the music fill his small apartment. One afternoon, as he stared at the blinking cursor on his screen, a new email from his editor, Ava, appeared at the top of his inbox. He clicked it. "How's the article going?" she wrote. "We're getting close to deadline. Remember, you need an angle. People want to know where you stand. Don't be afraid to say something clear." Jared leaned back in his chair and sighed. He understood what she meant. Articles that took a strong position got shared more. They started conversations. They made people click, read, and respond. If he wrote a safe, vague piece, some readers might lose interest before they reached the end. He opened the document where his draft lived. At the top, he had a strong introduction about the online debate and his own childhood memories of Whitney and Michael. In the middle, he had sections about the vocal coach's view, the historian's thoughts, and the fan stories. It was honest and careful. But when he scrolled to the bottom, he saw the same empty section. Conclusion. He rested his fingers on the keyboard and asked himself the question plainly. Should I choose one? Should I choose one? He tried it. He wrote a sentence that said Whitney was the better singer. He based it on what the vocal coach had said about her control, her ease, and her strength. He wrote about her clear notes, her power, and how many singers after her tried to sing like her. On the surface, the argument made sense. Then he read it back and felt something sink inside his chest. The words felt heavy in the wrong way. It was as if he had taken everything he had learned and tried to push it through a small, narrow door. The rest of the story, the fans who loved Michael's voice, the way he shaped words, the way he moved while singing felt reduced, almost erased. He deleted the line. Next, he tried the opposite. He wrote that Michael was the greater artist overall. He wrote about his huge impact, his stage presence, his influence on future performers, and the way his songs could make huge crowds sing along in one voice. He wrote about the mix of singing, movement, and message that made him stand out. Again, on the surface, it made sense. But when he read it, he felt another twist inside. Now it felt like he was using the word impact to cover too much ground. What about the people who cried listening to Whitney's voice? What about the singers who said they would not have dared to try certain songs if she had not done it first? That story was too big to be kept small, too. He sat still for a moment, staring at the screen, listening to the hum of his laptop fan. With a short laugh, more from frustration than humor, he dropped his hands from the keyboard. Why does it feel wrong either way? He wondered. He pushed his chair back, stood up, and walked to the window. Outside, the city moved on with its usual busy pace. Cars, bikes, people crossing the street with shopping bags, someone walking a dog, in a little jacket. It was an ordinary day for everyone else, but inside his apartment, he felt like he was standing at a small but important line. He knew how the internet worked. He had seen it many times. A long, careful article would get turned into one short line when people shared it. A headline or a sentence would be pulled out and passed around without context. If he wrote, Whitney outsang Michael, that would be the line people repeated. If he wrote, Michael was greater than Whitney, that would be the line instead. The soft, careful parts, the fan stories, the expert thoughts, the quiet emotions could easily disappear. Later that evening, he made himself a simple dinner and sat back down at his desk with his plate on one side. Instead of writing, he opened a new tab and went on to social media again. He typed in the names Whitney versus Michael and hit search. The screen filled with posts. He clicked on a thread where someone had shared a short clip of Whitney hitting a high note. The caption read, MJ could never do this. Under it, another person had posted a video of Michael dancing and singing live, writing, Whitney could never do this. Back and forth it went. No bad language, but also no real listening. Just quick answers like, this proves it, and end of discussion, and you must be wrong if you don't see it. In another thread, someone had shared a quote about Whitney's voice. The quote had been cut from a longer interview, and without the missing parts, it sounded like the speaker was pushing Michael aside. Jared knew that was common online. People clipped and cut things so they sounded stronger. Nuance got sliced off like it was extra weight instead of important meaning. He scrolled more and found short videos with dramatic titles like "Final Proof Whitney Wins" or "Michael Destroys All Competition." Most of them used the same few clips, over and over. Few of them ever mentioned context. The year of the performance. How tired someone might have been after a long tour. The sound quality of the recording. Or anything else that a fair listener would want to know. Jared felt something tighten in his chest again. He was not angry at the fans. He understood the love behind their posts. But he did not want his work to become one more piece in this narrow game, where the only thing that mattered was a quick winner or loser label. He closed the social media tab and opened one with videos. He decided to do something simple. Watch one full performance from Whitney and one full performance from Michael, right after each other, with no interruptions and no note-taking. Just watching as a human being, not as a writer. First, he chose a live performance of Whitney singing one of her big ballads on a stage with a simple background. The lights were soft, and her dress was elegant, but not too showy. As she began, the band played calmly behind her. Her voice came in gentle and smooth, like a friend greeting you at the door. As the song built, she grew stronger, and the notes rose higher. Her face showed the story of the song. The small hurts, the hope, the strength. By the final chorus, Jared felt his eyes sting a little. There was something pure about the way she stood there, still but full of life, and let her voice carry everything. When the crowd erupted into cheers and applause, he felt like cheering with them, even though he was alone in his apartment. He let the next video start. This time, it was Michael performing a song about making the world better. The stage was large, full of bright lights and moving effects. Dancers moved behind him, but somehow he still stood out at the center. He sang and stepped and turned, his voice rising and falling with the message of the song. As the song went on, the energy grew. The crowd lifted their hands. Some people sang along. Some closed their eyes. Near the end, Michael's voice had a rough edge in it. Not from weakness, but from feeling. It was as if he was reaching out with each word, asking the people in front of him to carry the message forward. When the performance ended, Jared sat in silence again. In that quiet moment, one simple thought came to him with clear force. Both of these people were gone. He had known that, of course. But seeing their younger faces full of light and energy, hearing their voices fill the room, then remembering that they were no longer alive, made it feel freshly real. He felt a small ache in his chest, the kind you get when you look at old photos of someone you miss. He thought of the fans who still played their songs every day. He thought of the young singers learning their music note by note, copying their styles in bedrooms and practice rooms all over the world. He thought of the way their songs still showed up in movies, at weddings, at family gatherings, on long drives. They were still here in that way, still present in the lives of people who had never even seen them perform live. Suddenly the idea of naming one better than the other felt not just too simple, but almost unkind. It felt like asking a person to choose between two parts of their own life, and say one part did not matter. He turned back to his laptop and opened his draft again. The empty conclusion section was still waiting. This time, instead of trying to choose a winner, he began to write honestly about his struggle. He wrote about Ava's email and the pressure to have a clear angle. He wrote about how he had tried to write each of them as better, and how those attempts had felt wrong. He described watching the performances that night and how it hit him that both artists were no longer here, yet still deeply present in people's hearts. He wrote that he understood why people asked the question, did Whitney really outsing Michael Jackson? He understood the desire to rank, to list, to say, this one is the best. But he also wrote that after speaking to experts and fans, and after truly listening, he had come to see that the more interesting question was not who wins, but what does it mean when we say someone outsang another? And what does this argument reveal about what we love in music? He decided that the line he would not cross was turning his thoughtful work into a simple winner versus loser story. He would not write a conclusion that reduced two rich lives and careers into one final score. Instead, he would invite readers to think about their own reasons. Why did they feel closer to one voice than the other? What memories and values sat behind their choice? His fingers moved more freely now. The conclusion began to grow, not as a final ruling, but as an open door. He showed respect to both artists, to their different strengths, and to the people who loved them. He knew some readers might be disappointed that he did not pick one clear winner. But he also knew that the readers who stayed with him to the end would understand what he was trying to do. By the time he stopped typing, the night was deep and quiet outside. He looked at the last lines he had written and felt a calm he had not felt all week. He had finally found his angle, not a sharp one meant to cut, but a gentle one meant to bring people closer to the heart of the music and the way it lived inside them. He hit save, closed his laptop, and sat in the dark for a moment, letting the soft echo of two great voices play in his mind. Side by side, not fighting, just existing in their own shining way. The morning Jared's article went online. He woke up before his alarm. For a few seconds, he lay still in bed, not quite remembering why his heart was beating a little faster than usual. Then it came back to him. Today was the day. He reached for his phone on the nightstand and saw a new email from Ava. The subject line read, "We're live." His thumb hesitated for a moment. Then he tapped it open. "Article is up," she wrote. "Nice work. Let's see how people react." He sat up slowly, feeling both excited and nervous. He opened the news site's app and scrolled until he saw the title, standing out in bold letters. Did Whitney really outsing Michael Jackson? We're asking the wrong question. Beneath the title was his name. Seeing it there made the whole thing feel suddenly very real. This was not just a file on his computer anymore. It was out in the world, ready for anyone to read. He clicked on the article and started reading, even though he knew every word. Still, it felt different now, sitting there on the clean white page with photos of Whitney and Michael placed carefully between paragraphs. His introduction described the online debate, the old videos, the arguments, and his own memories from childhood. The middle told the story of his visits to the vocal coach and the historian, and the hours spent listening to fans. The ending, the part he had struggled with the most, was there too, calm and clear. He did not choose a winner. Instead, he wrote about what the question revealed about people's hearts and what they look for in music. When he finished reading, he let out a slow breath he had not realized he was holding. He felt steady, not perfectly confident, not completely sure everyone would love it, but at peace with what he had said. His phone buzzed. A message from Ava appeared. "Already getting clicks," she wrote. "Comment section is starting to grow. Don't obsess, but maybe peek a little." He laughed to himself. "Don't obsess," he repeated under his breath. As if that were easy. He made himself get up and follow his usual morning routine. Wash his face, brush his teeth, make coffee, toast some bread. Only after he sat down at his small kitchen table, mug in hand, did he allow himself to open the comment section. The first few comments were short. "Interesting take. Nice read. I don't agree, but it's well written." Then they began to get longer. One reader wrote, "I came here ready to be angry because I thought you were going to say my favorite was better. But instead, you reminded me of why I love both. Thank you for that." Well? Quote. Another said, "I still think Whitney outsang Michael in pure voice. But you made me think about why I feel that way. My mom used to play her songs when I was little. Maybe that's part of it." Someone else wrote, "Michael will always be number one for me. But this article was fair. I liked that you showed respect to both. It made me remember the first time I saw him on TV. Jared smiled as he read. Not because everyone agreed, many still argued in the comments, but because the tone felt different from the quick, sharp fights he had seen earlier online. People were sharing stories, not just defending positions. They were talking about their parents, their childhoods, school dances, road trips, and quiet moments alone with headphones on. Of course, there were also comments that said things like, "You should have just said who's better," and "This is too soft. Pick a side." Jared read those too. He did not feel angry. He understood that some people simply wanted a clear answer. But he also noticed that even those comments often came with memories. It was almost as if people could not talk about Whitney or Michael without talking about themselves too. After a while, he closed the comment page and decided to call his mother. He wanted to hear her voice. She answered on the third ring. "Hi, baby," she said. "Big day, huh? You already saw it?" Jared asked. "Of course I did," she replied. "I had my coffee with your article this morning. Felt special." He laughed softly. "What did you think?" "I think you did something brave," she said. "You didn't try to sound smart just to sound smart. You wrote from the heart. You listened to people. You didn't turn it into a shouting match." "You're okay with me not picking one?" he asked. "Why would I want you to pick?" she said. "My heart has room for both. I danced to Michael at parties, and I sang along with Whitney while doing laundry. Why would I throw one away just to say the other is best?" Her words made him feel light. He could hear dishes in the background, and the soft sound of music from her radio. It made him think of being small again, sitting at the kitchen table while she hummed along to songs. "I'm proud of you," she added, "not because people will talk about it, but because you honored something that mattered to you." After they hung up, Jared sat quietly for a moment. Then he got up, walked to his desk, and opened his laptop again. More messages had arrived in his email. Some were from friends saying they liked the article. Others were from strangers. One email caught his eye. The subject line read, "Thank you from a vocal coach." "Hi, Jared," it said. "I'm a vocal coach in another city. I read your piece and wanted to say thank you. Many people talk about singers like they are only notes and records. You showed that behind every voice, there is a story. And behind every fan, there is another story. That matters." Another email was from a man who wrote, "I'm 55 years old, and I grew up with both Whitney and Michael. Your article brought tears to my eyes. It felt like someone finally understood why I can't choose between them. They remind me of different parts of my life, and both parts are important." There were also messages that respectfully disagreed. One person wrote, "I enjoyed your writing, but I think you could have given a bit more attention to how strong Michael's live vocals were. People forget that because they focus so much on the dancing." Jared smiled at that. It was a fair point, and he made a note to remember it for future work. In the afternoon, Ava called him. "You did good," she said without waiting for him to answer. He could hear the sound of typing in the background, the busy office life moving around her. "I'm glad you think so," he replied. "You should be proud," she went on. "The response is strong. Some people wanted a simple winner, but many are really thinking. That's the kind of conversation we want. And you know what I liked most?" "What?" he asked. "You didn't hide behind big words. You made it easy to read, but not empty. That's harder than it looks." He thanked her, and they talked briefly about his next possible projects. When they hung up, he felt a mix of relief and quiet happiness. The pressure he had carried in his shoulders all week seemed to loosen. That evening, he took a walk through his neighborhood to clear his head. The sky was turning a soft pink as the sun went down. People walked dogs, pushed strollers, talked on phones, or hurried home from work. In one store window, a screen played an old music video of Michael dancing on a lit sidewalk. In another shop a little farther down, he heard a Whitney song playing softly through the speakers. He stopped outside the second shop and listened for a moment. Through the glass, he could see the cashier nodding their head gently to the music while folding clothes. The scene was simple, almost ordinary, but it moved him. These songs were still part of everyday life, appearing in random corners of the city without any announcement. As he walked on, he thought about how his article might travel in its own quiet way. Maybe someone would read it on a train. Maybe a teacher would show it to a student who loved singing. Maybe a fan would send it to a friend with a message that said, "This is how I feel too." Later that night, after dinner, he checked social media again. People were sharing the article now, along with their thoughts. One person wrote, "This piece helped me see that I don't need to argue so hard. I can just enjoy both. 40 minus go." Another shared it with the caption, "If you love Whitney or MJ, read this. It made me think about music in a new way." Of course, there were also posts from people who said, "He should have just said Whitney wins," or "Come on, MJ is clearly the greatest." But even some of those posts had a lighter tone than the ones he had seen before. Some ended with little laughing faces or music emojis, as if people were starting to see the debate more as a shared love than a fight. As midnight approached, Jared sat on his bed with his back against the wall and his laptop resting on his knees. He played one more song before sleeping, this time a soft one from each artist. Whitney's voice filled the room first, then Michael's. He thought about everything this journey had given him. Not just a finished article, but a deeper understanding of how strongly people connect to music. He had seen how a voice could be more than sound. It could be comfort, strength, energy, memory. He had learned that when people argue about their favorites, they are often defending the feelings those songs protect inside them. He also realized something about himself. When he started, he thought this project was mostly about two great singers. But now, he knew it had also been about him learning to trust his own way of telling a story. He had chosen not to shout an answer, but to open a door. He had chosen not to pick a winner, but to show different kinds of greatness, side by side. As he closed his laptop, he looked around his small apartment. It was still the same space. The desk, with scattered notes. The books. The posters. The quiet hum of the fridge. But he felt a little different, like a person who had walked a long, thoughtful path and reached a gentle, honest place. He turned off the light and lay down, letting the darkness settle around him. In his mind, he could still hear echoes of music. Whitney's bright, clear notes, and Michael's warm, rhythmic phrases. They did not compete. They simply existed, each shining in their own way. And somewhere out there, in homes and cars and cafes, people were listening too, choosing their favorites, sharing their memories, and maybe, just maybe, thinking a little more kindly about how many ways a person can be great. Jared closed his eyes with a small smile, grateful that his work had become part of that larger, gentle conversation.